Today I'm going to walk you through picking out a quilt pattern and fabric for that quilt pattern at a quilt shop. I have made many beginner series videos on quilting as well as beginner pattern walkthroughs, but I started thinking about what really would have helped me a lot when I first started quilting, and one of the things I found very confusing and a little overwhelming was going into a quilt shop for the first time. So come shop with me. All right, so let's go pick out a quilt pattern and some fabric. When I first walk into a quilt shop, I like to browse around for a little bit. Now, I've been in this quilt shop many times because it is the one near me, but still they'll get in new fabrics and patterns a lot. So I like to browse around and see if any fabric immediately inspires me. And if there is a fabric line that really stands out, I'll sometimes look for a pattern that will suit that fabric really well. If nothing's really inspiring me, there are also a lot of quilt pattern displays, so I'll browse around those and see if anything inspires me there. I really love the quilt patterns by Quilt and Tia. If you haven't heard of them before, they are really fun. That is actually what I ended up choosing this time around. But the reason I really like them is because when you look at these patterns, there are some great options for you right away. So if you were inspired by some fat quarters you saw, there are fat quarter patterns by this company. If you were inspired by yardage, there are yardage patterns like full yards or half yards with these patterns. So there are a lot of options right away, and you know what to shop for just by looking at the front of these patterns. And it really makes it really easy to shop for these patterns because, for example, on this one, on the back, it shows you that all of the fabric is going to be cut in 1 yard cuts. I really like that because if you chose 1 yard cuts for this pattern and you decide you want to switch around where it's used, it's really easy to do that. Like I said, some of these patterns use fat quarters. I really find fat quarters fun to shop for because oftentimes in quilt shops, they're in a really beautiful display. It's really easy to hold them all and see what goes together and what may not. And they're often displayed by colors. So you might see all the blues together, all of the, black or white fabrics together. And it really makes it easy to shop for if you're looking for a specific look. Now, when you're shopping for patterns and fabric, one thing to take note of when you find a pattern is that some may require specialty rulers. So if you take a look at this pattern here, it tells you on it that to complete this pattern, you're going to need a special ruler to do that. I really love this line of patterns. So I'm not saying that this isn't a good thing or a bad thing. It's just something to look for on the pattern, and it's usually on the front or the back of it where it will tell you that you might need something special to complete that pattern. So just take a look at whatever pattern you are thinking of buying and make sure you pick up any of those extras you might need while you're at the store. Some patterns that you come across may require some pre-cut fabrics. One of them we already talked about was a fat quarter. Those are often considered a pre-cut fabric. Some other terms you might come across are jelly roll, and that is a beautiful bundle of 2.5-inch strips. And then you might come across a layer cake, and that is a bundle of 10-inch squares. So those you might also see on a pattern that you find, and now you know what to look for if you see that term. So while I was at the quilt shop, I decided on a Quilt and Tia pattern. So with this pattern, I was able to look at the back of it, and it actually shows you on the front too that I would need 5 1-yard cuts of fabric. Now on the back of this pattern, it is also really interesting because it really is a great guide on what type of fabric I need to look for. So it tells me that I need 1 yard of a large scale print, 1 yard of a medium scale print, and then I need 1 yard of a light fabric, 1 yard of a medium fabric, and 1 yard of a dark fabric. And then it also lets me know that to complete this pattern, I will also need 1 yard of binding and 4 yards of backing fabric. So when I had my pattern in hand, I started browsing the shelves in the fabric shop again, looking for some fabric that I thought might work for this quilt. Now, oftentimes I will stick with a line of fabric, and that just means all of these fabrics were designed to go together. So all the colors and patterns all work really well together. So they're often shelved together when they are in the same line of fabric, so it makes it really easy to shop for them. Now you can find a fabric that you really love in one line of fabric and one that will go really well together in another line, and that's okay. Just for me, and especially when starting out, it's really nice to have those lines of fabric where everything goes nicely together. I found the Beautiful Day line of fabric, and I absolutely love this line of fabric, and I was drawn to it right away. I've actually used it before in another quilt. I just really love the print and the colors in this line. So I decided to go with this one because I thought it would really work well together to show how to pair fabrics. So if the pattern you are using requires 1 yard cuts of fabric, you're definitely going to be shopping bolts of fabric. And you can see here that bolts of fabric are just, the fabric is all wrapped on its original bolt. So you can get it in many different cut variations. So you could go and ask for a 1/4 yard, you could ask for a 1/2 yard, a full yard, 3 yards, whatever you need for your pattern. So that makes it a little harder in a sense to shop for because you're going to be carrying around a lot of bolts of fabric if you're shopping for a full pattern. So if you are new to shopping for fabric, you may want to know that on the actual bolt of fabric, that is where you can find a lot of information about the fabric. You can find how much 1 yard of the fabric costs. You can find what the designer's name is, what the line of fabric is. You can find a lot of information there right on the bolt. So that'll make it easier for you with shopping so that you know the price and all of that. And you'll also know what line of fabric it is in, because maybe the quilt shop you're in doesn't carry the entire line. So you could look up and see if you could find the rest of the line somewhere else to find fabrics that might work for your pattern. Once you have picked out all of the fabric that you'll be using, you can take all those bolts of fabric up to the cutting area in the quilt shop or fabric shop that you're in. So you would just take it all up to their cutting station and let the person know how much you need cut from each bolt of fabric. Mine was really easy because, like I said, with this pattern, all of them are 1 yard cuts except for the backing. But the pattern you find may require different cuts. I have 7 different bolts that I'm bringing up there. If they were all different cuts, like if I just needed a 1/2 yard of the light and a yard of the dark fabric, 3/4 a yard of the medium, I want to make sure that they're getting the right cuts so when I get home I have the right amount of fabric. With this one it's a little bit easier because 5 of them are 1 yard cuts and then the backing is 4. I can still shop around and find other stuff if I want to. So here is a closer look at the fabric that I purchased. On the pattern you can see I had 1 yard of a large scale print and it says Think Focus fabric. So a fabric that has, you know, a nice big print on it. It's going to be a larger cut on the quilt. So you'll be able to see all of the nice design. And make sure it's a fabric that you really, really love and a pattern you really love. Then I got a yard of a medium scale print. So the designs on it's a little bit smaller. Then I have a yard of my light fabric, a yard of my medium fabric, and a yard of my dark fabric. And you know, when I'm looking at the example here, their dark fabric is a lot darker than the one I chose. But when you look at all of the other fabrics together, it's probably a little bit darker than the rest of them, so I think it'll work in the pattern. Then I have my binding here. I love stripe bindings, so I immediately knew I'd want to use that for the binding. And then I have my backing fabric. Now that all of your fabric is cut and you're ready to go, One more thing that you may want to grab while you're at the quilt shop or a fabric shop is the batting for your quilt. So the batting is going to go in the middle of your quilt to keep you all warm and cozy. So be sure to grab that so that you can easily finish up your quilt. Other than your basic sewing supplies, you are all set with making your quilt. In the next video, I will go over prepping and cutting your fabric. So I'll see you then. Bye.